The Gradius franchise has been dead for about a decade now, but Gradius V certainly wasn't what killed it. Released for the PlayStation 2 in 2004, Gradius V was a gigantic leap for the franchise over the lackluster fourth installment. Instead of being developed by Konami, this sequel was outsourced to Treasure, the studio behind shooter classics such as Gunstar Heroes, Radiant Silvergun, and Ikaruga. Much of Treasure's design sensibilities, visual flair, and audio style are very present in this title. There was probably no development studio at the time that could have made Gradius V better than what Treasure was able to come up with. Gradius started out as a follow-up to the 1981 arcade shooter Scramble, and was instrumental in defining the space shooter genre. Most games beforehand involve flying through empty space, shooting endlessly spawning waves of enemies, but games like Gradius push the genre forward into a level-based format with environments to fly through and large bosses to fight. Gradius quickly established its own identity with many unique ideas, such as a weapon bar power-up system, that still make Gradius stand out from all the rest. The original Gradius arcade game was way ahead of its time, but still feels like a classic Golden Age arcade cabinet, marking an exciting transition into video games during the mid-80s. Gradius games have always been good, but mostly fall short of perfection. There's always something off about them, like weird hit detection, slowdown, excessive levels of unfair difficulty, and making the player restart at a checkpoint on death. However, Gradius games are so much fun to play that the series managed to survive in spite of all the flaws that keep showing up in each new installment. Even the weakest Gradius games have nice graphics and awesome music, and the franchise core elements always provide an exciting and action-packed experience. I'm sure that you fantasized about what it would be like to see your favorite game franchise be taken over by another studio to see what their approach would be. Studio crossovers like this rarely happen, and it seems to be the case that it usually turns out well, like what Way Forward was able to do with Contra, or the incredible Metroid Prime games made by Retro Studios. It just seems like a great idea to me to hand off a franchise to a qualified development house and see what a fresh pair of eyes and a different creative sensibility can come up with. Gradius V feels exactly like a proper entry in the Gradius series, but it also feels like a spiritual sequel to Treasure's Ikaruga, which had come out a couple years prior. Treasure was very diligent in making sure most of the classic elements of Gradius's formula were accounted for, while also making sure players can tell it's a treasure shooter. The most extraordinary part of this process was the stuff that they cut out. Treasure actually had the courage to take an honest look at the Gradius formula and fix the long-standing problems and design flaws that Konami refused to remedy, and what resulted is a Gradius game so much better than the others that you'll have a difficult time tolerating previous installments ever again. Well, except Gradius Gaiden. That game's awesome and holds up very well. Be warned, Gradius V is a very difficult game. Take it from me, don't screw around when you play this game for the first time. Go into the options and set everything you can to make the game as easy as possible. Gradius V will slaughter new players even on easy, so turn the difficulty down to very easy, set the player stock to 5, and set extend to give you extra lives with the least amount of points. Before the game starts, you'll get to configure your ship, Vic Viper, which is one of the coolest looking starfighters in all of science fiction. On a new save file, you only get 4 choices at the beginning. This may seem like a narrow selection, but after you beat the game once, you'll unlock Weapon Edit Mode, which grants you complete control over each piece of your loadout, and gives you access to fun weapons like Flame Blaster, or the classic Frontal Shield. This is a great motivation to completing the game, because Weapon Edit gives you access to a ton of different strategic possibilities, and gives this game tremendous amounts of replay value. Because of the way all the levels are designed, Gradius V is a completely different experience based on the loadout you choose, so be sure to experiment. The gimmick that distinguishes the Gradius franchise from other shooters is the weapon bar system. The power-ups you grab on the playfield are essentially a currency, which you can save up to purchase upgrades on the fly. Increasing your ship's speed only costs 1 power-up, while adding another option to your formation costs 5. Managing the weapon bar can be difficult, especially in the heat of battle, but it's essential to get the hang of it if you want to get very far. There's a few weapon bar tricks that all Gradius veterans know that still work here, such as keeping your cursor hovering over the last slot so you can immediately buy another force field to replenish it once the other one runs out. The most important decision to make when choosing a loadout is what type of option formation you want. Options are the little orbs of energy that follow your ship around and shoot all the same weapons that you do. Gradius V introduces a new feature to the series, which is the ability to activate your option formation and make them behave in useful ways. Gradius V's level design throughout the game is such that each formation type will excel in some areas and will be incredibly weak in others. I feel like this is good game design because it makes just about any loadout that you could possibly come up with viable. It can definitely be argued that some loadouts are better than others at very high level play, but I really don't think anything you can choose is bad. If you're playing this game for the first time, I'd recommend using Type 2 direction first, which lets you rotate the fire of your options 360 degrees to fire in any direction that you want. After you've gotten at least one option from the weapon bar, you can hold R1 and move to change the direction of fire. This gives you a tremendous amount of versatility throughout the game, and makes cleaning up the top, bottom, and rear of the screen much easier than it would be with the other choices. Not being able to attack in every direction can make many parts of the game a huge pain, especially for new players. Direction gives you the flexibility you need to make it through the game, and also looks super cool when you sweep the laser around. It may seem awkward that you can't move while aiming your lasers, but you'll discover quickly that the way Gradius V is designed allows for this without it ever really feeling like a handicap at all. The other formation I recommend for new players is rotation. Holding R1 will cause your option to orbit around your ship, which, coupled with laser fire, can help you keep safe from destructible objects heading towards you. Note that bullets and lasers won't be destroyed, so you'll still have to be diligent in dodging enemy fire. Luckily though, there's thousands and thousands of destructible objects threatening you through the course of the game that rotation will protect you from. You can turn your ship into an orb of destruction that you can use to carve paths through difficult segments unscathed. Unfortunately, rotation is extremely lacking in offensive power against armored targets. Your lasers are constantly spinning around and aren't focusing on any particular point, which makes destroying narrow pieces of boss armor a struggle. You can still let go of the R1 button to use the default snaking behavior of your options to stack your lasers into a single stream, but other option types, like freeze, can do this and still maintain focused firing while moving. Freeze lets you lock the current shape of your option formation and move around with it stuck that way. This is probably the one that advanced players are going to eventually be using all the time, because with enough creativity, it can do anything. Nothing Vic Viper can use in this game can fire through obstacles, but you can come close by freezing your options far in front of you and damage enemies from the inside. Note that with higher ship speed, you can spread your options out further and create wider coverage. The other thing Freeze does is easily allow you to stack your lasers into a single stream, which can multiply your damage up to 5 times. The fourth choice for option array is spacing, which I really only recommend for new players. Basically, your options will fly out on the top and bottom of your ship in a fixed position, which you can close or open with the R1 button. Pressing R1 will open the formation, letting go and pressing it again will close the formation. It's the choice that really doesn't offer much for expert players. Spacing is viable to get through the game, but it really has a hard time competing with the other option types. The saving grace with it is that you can close the formation all the way to focus your fire, but Freeze can do the same thing and has far better benefits beyond that. I think Freeze and Direction are probably the best. Direction still beats out Freeze in its ability to strike anywhere on the screen. You can lock your options backwards and attack behind you using Freeze, but it won't work quite as well as Direction. Freeze and Direction are really fun to use, and you'll get a lot of mileage out of them. You're very likely not going to get through this game on your first try, so you're going to want to play around with your loadout until you find one that you're comfortable with. Your default shot is the machine gun, which is much more viable in this game than other Gradius games. You can only have so many shots on screen at once with the machine gun, so flying closer to an enemy will increase your damage output. You can also upgrade your shots to double, which fires differently based on your loadout. They fire a default shot in front and another in a different direction. This can help you clear out the stuff in the pesky top, bottom, and rear parts of the screen, but you sacrifice half your damage in each direction, because your shots are split. Depending on your playstyle, you might find double to be great, but I don't personally get that much out of it. Most likely, you're going to want to skip double and go with laser instead, which is an umbrella term to refer to laser, E-laser, fire blaster, and ripple laser. These are the most powerful shots that you can get, and will completely change your game depending on which one you pick. Fire Blaster has high damage but very short range. It's very difficult to use, but something advanced players will get a lot of mileage out of with practice. E-Laser lets you charge your shots for a very long time to dish out gigantic energy blasts. It's embarrassingly bad against large formations of weak enemies, but when it's time to take down something large and heavily armored, you can make very short work of them, including bosses. Unfortunately, tapping the button to fire small shots with it are even worse than the default machine gun. E-Laser is very difficult to use, but when the situation calls for it, E-Laser does things nothing else can. Ripple Laser is a safe bet, although I don't consider it to be tremendously powerful. It'll make short work of swarms of small enemies, but it's dismal at attacking armored targets. It's really fun to use though. You can also select a missile type, which is an extra shot that fires alongside your main weapon. Missiles can offer vertical coverage or increased frontal damage. My preference is Spread Bomb, which explodes in a wide area. Missiles are inexpensive and have no drawbacks, so make sure you purchase them whenever you can. One benefit of missiles is that they fire independently of your main weapon, so they can still attack while you're charging your E-Laser. One thing Treasure did to fix the Gradius franchise was allow the player to spawn in place when they die. Other Gradius games will stop the game and restart at a checkpoint when the player dies. But in Gradius V, another ship flies onto the screen and the action keeps going. This is such a massive improvement to the series, and it makes the game more fun and far less frustrating. The game isn't easier because of it, because Gradius V's level design is balanced with this new mechanic in mind. The whole game flows so much better without the constant interruptions and restarts, and I prefer it over the old system. However, if you prefer the classic style of dying, you can just turn on Revival Start in the options menu, but I really doubt you're going to want to. If you've played a Gradius game before and didn't really like it, I think the Revival Start system was probably the reason why. Try Gradius V before you write off the series for good, because it's a massive improvement. Gradius V takes a lot of practice to get through. When you start, you'll only have 3 credits to play with, and with each hour of play, you get another one. After 17 hours, you'll unlock Free Play, which is Unlimited Continues. Note that this is game time, so you can't cheese it by pausing the game and leaving it on overnight. The good news is, you can practice any segment of the game you've reached in the main game as many times as you want, and try out different equipment loadouts to see which one you like for specific reasons. Thanks, Treasure, for putting in a feature every shooter game should have. This game is full of quick surprises that are almost too fast to avoid on reaction, so there's a bit of memorization involved. Doors will close that never open again, floors and ceilings will squash you, and enemies are constantly popping out of the corners of the screen. Dying pops your options out into the field, which you have to collect again. You'll be invincible for a short while, so it's usually doable. However, some fast-moving sections will scroll your lost options off the screen faster than you'll be able to grab them, which will put you in a very difficult situation. Dying too much will weaken you severely, and with low firepower, you can get overwhelmed and have a very tough time building it up again. One way to help you with this problem is to use the Konami code. Pause the game and input up, up, down, down, left, right, L1, R1, then resume the game. You'll get fully powered up, and your laser and shield will be refreshed. Use L2, R2 if you want double instead of laser. Every stage you complete where you don't use the code, you build up another use of the code, and after which it won't work anymore. It's a good idea to start using this code on your last credit, and hopefully you can use this to prolong your survival and get to the end. Gradius V provides an incredible amount of level variety, and it's really long by shooter standards. The levels also get longer as the game progresses, so it really feels like a marathon to get to the end. One thing that really surprises me about Gradius V is how many bosses there are. I feel like this development studio pushed themselves to the brink to cram in as much content into the game as they possibly could, almost as if they knew it was going to be the last Gradius game. There are 2 boss rush segments in the game that are basically entire levels with one boss after the other. They'll keep throwing boss after boss at you after you're sure the one you just beat had to be the last one. Gradius V actually has a really cool, albeit simple, storyline. I won't spoil it in this review, but it involves time travel, and there's a really giddy payoff at the end that's extremely satisfying and something I've never seen done in a game before or since. A lot of times I'm not that into story, but I played this game through so many times that I kinda enjoyed it. After you beat the game, it'll start over from the beginning, only way harder. The game can actually be looped a total of 256 times this way, and it gets more insane with each loop. It's worth trying to complete a couple of these loops because there's a lot of non-trivial changes to the enemies, and the levels are cool to see. Gradius V is a tough game to give a definitive verdict on. The fact is, a lot of people aren't going to be as stoked as I am. A lot of people don't like hardcore shooters like this, and Gradius V is about as hardcore as it gets for the genre. The target audience is somewhat narrow despite the incredible level of quality. Even people turned on to this game by this video might find they're unable to tolerate the high difficulty level. I do a lot of live streams and I play a lot of hard games pretty often, and for my first time through, I found this to be a pretty hard ordeal. The game has a great two-player cooperative mode, but the game's high difficulty will make it a bit tougher to find somebody who will want to play with you. Definitely wait until you've unlocked free play mode to play with a friend. That way you can fumble your way through and not worry too much about running out of credits. In my opinion, Gradius V is a nearly perfect game. I have a few minor nitpicks though, such as the fact that there are unskippable cutscenes in a couple places during the game, and there are maybe one or two boring and slow segments. And the music isn't quite as fun as the other Gradius games, even though the music is still pretty good. The game does overuse the technological robotic setting a bit too much. I would have preferred more biological, body horror enemies and environments to face off against. This is the culmination of everything the Gradius series has been trying to accomplish since it first hit arcades in 1985. 14 years later, I don't think any shooter has come out that I've played since that's been able to top it. Gradius V is an absolute triumph and an incredibly deep game you could spend years trying to master. This game was designed by Gradius fans, but also fans who happen to be astoundingly talented as game developers, similar to what happened with Sonic Mania. There was a WiiWare Gradius that came out later, but this was the very last of the mainline Gradius games. It's heartbreaking that we may never get Gradius 6, but the series ending with what is honestly one of the greatest games ever made is more than we could have ever asked for. This was an absolutely proper send-off. What Treasure did with Gradius is what I wanted to see more from gaming, and sometimes what sequels really need is to get rid of the things that don't work, rather than excessively building on what is already established. We saw this in Zelda Breath of the Wild, which got rid of a lot of Zelda's less stellar traditions in favor of just plain better design. We see the opposite of this in so many other series that refuse to cut and rework core parts of gameplay that have become stagnant or were never fun in the first place. For that, I think Treasure deserves some serious recognition for transforming Gradius from a fun but flawed series into a shooter masterpiece. If you have a PS3, download this from the store and give it a shot. Gradius V will dazzle you with glowing lasers, intimidating bosses, and meaningful rewards for defeating overwhelming challenges. If you only play one Gradius game, make it this one.